Today I'll be taking a look at Munchkin Panic. Is it Munchkin? Is it Castle Panic? Is it Munchkin? Is it Castle Panic? No, it's two great tastes in one! Anyway, it's a mashup between Steve Jackson Games' Munchkin as well as Fireside Games' Castle Panic. Now, interestingly enough, Justin DeWitt used to work for Steve Jackson Games, so he's very familiar with Munchkin. This game is for 1 to 6 players, ages 10 and up. It's cooperative, and then it can be also not so cooperative, and I'll get into that in just a bit. But we'll take a look at the back of the box here, and I should point out that we have played Munchkin Panic a few times, so when I open up the box, you'll see some of the components aren't in their bags and things like that. So if you're familiar with Castle Panic, you're going to be very familiar with the different rings, the towers, and so on and so forth. So the difference here is the monsters all have a very Munchkin feel to it. And then if you play some of the variant rules, you're also going to have a bigger Munchkin type of aspect where everybody's kind of trying to be the master Munchkin overall. So let's take a look inside. And we start off, we've got the rulebook here, and it's pretty short. It's not going to take a whole lot of time for anybody to delve into. Castle Panic itself is a relatively easy game to get started with, too. So it's going to talk about setting up the game, the order of play. There are some differences with the order of play than you would have in Castle Panic. Talking about some of the treasure cards, how monsters move, placing the monsters, and of course that's determined by the number of players. More players means more monsters. Kind of talking about the different treasure cards in more detail. The different tokens, showing all the different little monsters and how many health points they have. Some variations, and this is where it gets more into feeling like a game of Munchkin than a game of Castle Panic. I'm talking about that as well. And then a sample turn. So all in all, really you're looking at 11 pages of rules to get started with. Then we've got the map. And I'll be laying this out so you'll be able to see it in more detail as well when I talk about the gameplay. So I will fold that back up again. Of course, you're going to have the towers that you're defending. So you've got 6 of those. You've got some walls as well that the monsters are going to be taking down. You've got your Munchkin Panic bag that holds all the monster tokens and curse tokens as well, because there's some curses. In fact, look at that. Just pulled out a curse right off the bat. You've got the White Brothers. The huge rock. Yes, the huge rock. And I'll get to this in just a moment. It's like a lot of curses we're getting. The 3,872 orcs, which kind of cracked us up because it has a health all of 1. So 1 hit wipes out all those orcs. The Platicore, which, funny enough, I'm running across tokens here that really stood out to me, like the huge rock. But I thought the Platicore was pretty funny, taking a look at that. So there's a lot of tongue-in-cheekness to the monsters. Pulling them out for the first time led a lot of us to kind of chuckle. So we've got that. There's a Munchkin die. Munchkin Panic die, maybe I should say. Then there's a couple of other... Oh, I took them to the side. You can fortify walls, and then there's a glob of glue that you can use that monsters get stuck on, so they're still sitting in the bag there. Then you've got various cards. You've got 2 decks of cards. Take these out here. You've got treasure cards as well as castle cards. Now there's also some reference cards that each of the players can get too. So you can put those in front of everybody so they have an easier time making their way through the game. So as I mentioned, you've got the Munchkin Panic Castle cards, and then the Munchkin Panic Treasure cards. And these are going to be what you'll use, for the most part, to attack the monsters that are approaching the towers and the walls. Red Swordsman, Green Swordsman, Green Hero, any color Swordsman. Then you've got a few other cards that you'll get where they have some special abilities, like the Duck of Doom Curse, Truly Obnoxious Curse, Wandering Monster, Fortifying a Wall, and once again more of the different knights. There's that Flask of Glue I was talking about. So all the players are going to be utilizing these cards, and you'll be able to draw new cards every turn. You also have the treasure cards, which you'll start off with a treasure card, or a few treasure cards, depending on how many players you've got. And you also earn treasures by killing the monsters. Very, very Munchkin-like. Really impressive title. The Buckler of Swashing. Spiky Knees. And as we can see, we've got the Munchkin Artwork, thanks to John Kovalik. I believe I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, hopefully. But these are going to be cards that you'll get while you're playing, and then you can use them. A lot of them are just, one-time use, as opposed to Munchkin, where you would add them to your characters. Most of these are just one-shot cards. So we've got those as well. Then, off to the side, there are variants to make Munchkin Panic much more like a Munchkin game. So there's a lot more backstabbing, not as much cooperation involved. So we've got these cards in here. They're kept separately, so that if you want to just play the core game, you can play the core game, or if you want to have more Munchkin. So each of the players would have a character, giving them special abilities as well. Then there's some additional treasure cards. And there's an extra castle card that would be added into the decks also. So that's what you've got inside Munchkin Panic. Munchkin Panic carries an MSRP of $39.95. So now that we've seen what's inside the box, let's take a look at the gameplay. I've got Munchkin Panic set up for a 3-player game, and the first thing I'll point out, I apologize, I can't zoom too far out, so I can't get the entire play area in. The board's not huge, obviously enough. I mean, it's going to fit on somebody's kitchen table or your dining room table or wherever you play games. And of course, people's cards aren't all going to be up onto the board. You're going to have them spread out a bit. But for a 3-player game, you're going to start off, each of the players will get 5 castle cards. They get 1 treasure card. I think I misspoke earlier when I mentioned you could start off with more than 1. You can start off with 1 or 0. So the more players, the fewer treasure cards. So if you've got like a 6-player game, nobody's going to start with a treasure card. So everybody gets those cards dealt out. And then you're going to take 4 monsters out of the Munchkin Panic bag. Kind of a cool bag, isn't it? And you're going to lay them out. You're going to roll your die. And you're going to put them in the archer ring as far as, like, say, for an example, I rolled a 4, and I pulled a lame goblin. The lame goblin will go there. I also rolled another 4 when I got the Pikachu. So the Pikachu's going down there. And this is only when you first set up the game, because you have to give the first player something to try to kill. As you progress and more monsters come onto the board, they're all going to go down into this forest. So they can't be hit, but they'll eventually begin moving along here. If you're not familiar with Castle Panic, or let's say Dead Panic, the way the tokens are set up is they will show the health for the creature, the monster, whatever. And this one, for an example, has a health of 3. Well, if it takes a point of damage, he's going to drop down to a 2 or to a 1 until it's eliminated. So some of these, for an example, the Lame Goblin only has a health of 1. You'll see there's this little yellow dot, and that indicates to whoever kills that monster how many treasure cards they're going to actually get to receive. Some of these have 2. Most of them only have the 1. Something else to also keep in mind is that the person who kills that monster will take that token and they're going to put it off to the side, because for scoring at the end of the game, if you guys win, then you're going to add up the total health as far as the creatures that you killed to determine who's the Master Munchkin. Now, I'm only really showing you the core game. There's a lot of different variants. There's the More Munchkin variant. I showed you those extra cards. The way I look at it so far is for 1 to 3 players, you can go with the core game. It's going to have enough challenge for you. You're going to have a lot of fun. By all means, you can do the More Munchkin. It'll just make it a little tougher for you to win. When you've got 4 to 6 players, if you're playing just the core game, things are going to be fairly easy unless you guys draw really bad cards and pull out curses in that really hurt you. So for the most part, 1 to 3 players, yeah, go with the core game. If you want to add more Munchkin, by all means. If not, if you've got more players, 4 to 6, I definitely recommend going with More Munchkin. So as far as the order of play, very simple, and the order of play is marked on every corner of the board, so it's impossible for anybody to miss, is you can discard 1 card. Even right off the bat, looking at what you've got, you can discard 1 card. So taking a look, this Lightning Curse, you probably want to hang on to that. That's pretty cool. Just taking a quick peek around what you've got on the board, you're looking for Archer cards to be able to kill something. Well, we've got draw 2 castle cards. We may want to use it now, may want to hang on to it. But we do see we have the blue Archer card, and we have the 3,872 orcs in the blue Archer ring. So we know we're going to keep that. So for right now, we're not going to draw up. Well, we won't draw up. So now you would have giving charity. So you have to keep in mind that you can only have so many treasure cards at one time in your hand. You can have as many as 3 in a 3-player game. And we've got loaded dice. Sweet! And you'll see it can be played at any time, because some of these treasure cards can only be played on a certain creature or at a certain time. You can only have 3 treasure cards in a 3 or more player game. In 1 or 2 players, you can have 4. But you can end up with more than those 3 in your hand at the end of your turn. So what you would end up doing is any extra cards have to be given away as charity. And what you'll do is you'll actually take a look to see who has the fewest token points, and they're the ones who will receive those cards. And if it's a tie, you can kind of determine things. Not a huge deal. Then, in the third phase, you're going to play cards, you're going to negotiate, and you're going to get your trophies. So here we already saw that we've got a blue Archer. We know we can take out, because it says hit any monster in the blue Archer ring for 1 point, we can take out any monster that's in the Archer ring in blue that has 1 health. Now, for an example, if we had a monster there that had 2 health, we could ask other players if they wanted to help out. That's the negotiation. So if somebody else had a blue archer card, you may say, well, I'll tell you what, if you play that blue archer card with my blue archer card, you can have the monster token, I take the treasure. And things along those lines. Keep in mind, it is cooperative because if you lose, everybody loses. But you don't want to be too cooperative because you still want to be that master munchkin. So let's say the other players either don't have a card that can help me, or they're just being jerks. I have the ability to play the blue archer card on the orcs, which I will. This would be discarded. The orcs are killed, so I get that trophy. So it's going to be worth 1 trophy point. It also had 1 yellow dot. So in the next phase, I get to take as many treasure cards as I have dots that I've killed, well, dots on monster tokens that I've killed for the turn. So I would get to draw 1 treasure card, but I'm not going to get to use it until someone else's turn because I've already had my chance to play cards unless it says play at any time. So for an example, this magic missile says it has to be played with an archer or a hero to add an additional point. Well, I've already played my cards, so I can't use it this turn. So that would go in my hand. And a lot of times you're going to have your treasures face down so the other players don't see what they are. Once we've completed that, now we're going to move the monsters. And normally the monsters will move 1 ring closer in. And you want to keep in mind, once a monster hits one of these walls, they take the wall down, they would take a point of damage. So for an example, Lame Goblin, let's say he hit the wall at some point in time. He takes the wall down, but he's only got 1 health point, so he's eliminated. His token goes off to the side. Nobody killed him, so off he goes. Nobody gets to claim the treasure or the trophy for him. Put that back here. I should also point out, setting up a game of Munchkin Panic will take you no more than about 5 minutes. Especially if you're like me and you tend to sort your components out when you put the game away. Boom. Just pull everything out, set up the walls and the towers, and you're done. So you're going to continue going around, obviously. Now, after you move the monsters, you're going to place monsters too. So depending on the number of players will determine how many monsters get placed. And now you can actually have curses coming out of this as well. So with a 3-player game, you would have 3 monsters coming out. Strangely enough, in a 6-player game, you only have 2 monsters, which I don't understand why there'd be fewer monsters coming out than in a game with fewer players. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe it's a misprint. I'm not sure. So we're going to take 3 out. We're going to roll our bone here. So that'd be a 1, and it would be a curse. So the first thing we run across is move monsters in red 1 space. So now suddenly we have the undead horse in the swordsman ring. So he's very close to taking out a wall. And of course, that would be discarded. Take another one out. Obviously, I'm not going to play an entire game here for you. A 3. And we would get the Plutonium Dragon, who's the biggest, baddest guy in the game. He's got 5 health. So he's pretty tough. So if you notice, you can knock him down, and then he gets to 3, and he's one of those creatures where you need to do 3 points of damage to him at one time to knock him out of the game. So he'd be going in the forest here. And we'll take 1 more out, and we get the floating nose, who would be going over into the forest at 2. Once you've done that, you've completed play for that person. So then you would move to the next person, and then they get to play their cards, and the monsters continue to move up, and you've got the different treasures to make it a bit easier for you. If you can go through all of the tokens in the bag and still have one of the towers remaining, then you win. Everybody's going to win, but you're also going to add up all of your trophy tokens here to see who's the Master Munchkin, who has the most points. They're the overall winner. But if you don't have any walls or any more of these towers standing, then everybody loses. It doesn't matter. So there in itself is pretty much how you play Munchkin Panic. Plays pretty quickly. It doesn't take a whole lot of time for people to learn the rules. It's very, very easy. Everything's written on the cards. Now, of course, in the rulebook, they do have some explanations of, the monsters and some of the treasures and things like that. But everything's really on the cards. You don't have to look at the rules more than maybe once or twice after you start playing your first game of Munchkin Panic. It's that easy. So there's the gameplay for Munchkin Panic. What do I think of it overall? You might be wondering, what is my verdict when it comes to Munchkin Panic? And I'll be the first to point out that if you're not a fan of Castle Panic, it's probably not going to be your cup of tea. Now, on the flip side of that, maybe you don't like Munchkin, but you like Castle Panic. Then by all means, I think you're going to get a kick out of Munchkin Panic. Plus, how can you not like Castle Panic? It's a fun family game. It's great for winter time or cold weather. You get the kids together and play. What I dig about Munchkin Panic is it's not necessarily cooperative, especially if you use the more Munchkin variant. And it's pretty funny when it gets to the point where you're playing that more Munchkin variant, because it doesn't matter if the tower is destroyed or not. All you care about is being the player who is the Master Munchkin, the one who has the most trophy points at the end of the game. So regardless if the tower survives and all the monsters are killed, or the tower falls, if you've got the most trophy points, you're the winner. Plus there's quite a bit of take that involved as well. In the core game itself, without using the more Munchkin variant, there's still a bit of take that to the game, and you don't necessarily have to cooperate with the other players if you don't want to. Obviously enough, everybody loses if the tower falls, so you do have to cooperate somewhatly. But at the end of the day, it's still all about those trophy points. I think Panic is a lot of fun. I chuckled at a lot of the monster tokens that I pulled out and took a peek at them. And it's got the Munchkin artwork from John Kovalik or however it's pronounced. I'm sorry, John. I have to give Munchkin Panic a very solid 8.7. And I know a few people out there might be wondering, well, wait a second, Jeff. Munchkin Panic, you're giving an 8.7, but didn't you give Dead Panic something like a 6.7, 2 full points lower? Isn't it the same kind of game? Well, not really. With Dead Panic, I had some problems with how the zombies would move and trying to find line of sight, and I thought the rules were a lot more convoluted than they needed to be for a game of that sort. With Munchkin Panic, you bust it out, takes you 5 minutes to teach people how to play, if even that, and then about 5 minutes to set it up, and you're good to go. Now, I have to point out that some of the curse tokens, you are going to want to take a closer look inside the book to read up on what they do. So we had the huge rock come out right at the beginning of the game, in one of the games we played, and I wasn't holding on to the rules, someone else was, and for some strange reason they thought the huge rock actually just goes all the way across the board, smashing monsters and taking down any walls or towers in its way. Well, that's not the case. It does squish the monsters, but once it hits a wall or tower, it just takes that one out. So the first time we played, it was sort of like, well, wait a second here. We're like in the second round of the game and we've already lost 4 walls, or walls and towers. So you may want to have to take a peek, make sure you get those curses correct, and apply them correctly to the game. Once again, I think Munchkin Panic is a lot of fun. If you like Castle Panic, you're definitely going to want to consider picking it up. If you don't have Castle Panic, and maybe that whole concept of just, you know, the hand-holding kumbaya cooperative gameplay didn't appeal to you, you might want to take a peek at Munchkin Panic because it's got a bit of take that to it. So once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks so much for checking out the video review for Munchkin Panic. And be sure to swing over to thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, and a whole lot more.